spirit, a blazing truth that never fades, a moon to move my quiet waters, a star to guide me through the shade. Day and night both bend around me, rhythm dancing in my bones. Seasons shift but never shake me. I walk in wisdom fully grown. You wrote my timing in the sky. You set the pace for how I rise. Lights in my sky. Constellations in my veins, a holy compass in my ribcage, a sacred rhythm in my name. You made my soul a universe where revelation blooms and spins. My soul reflects the heaven within. You move me like the moonlight. You hold me like the sunrise. You guide me with the starlight. You awakened all my insides. You shine on me. Sun in my spirit, moon in my soul, stars in my voice, stars in my voice. Sun in my spirit, stars in my voice. I breathe in, I return to awareness. I remember who I am. Our source, origin of life within me, rests behind my breathing, in higher awareness, beyond my fear, beyond my ego, beyond confusion. Let your nature awaken in me. Holy is your nature, love without distortion, light without shadow, wisdom without fear. Let your heart rise in me. Let your wisdom move through me. In my thinking, in my breathing, in my living. As it lives in higher awareness, let it live through me. Give me today the bread of clarity, the strength for this moment. Where I miss the mark, I realign. Where others miss the mark, I let them be free. Let no weight remain. Lead me gently away from old patterns, from fear's voice, from ego's pull. When distortion rises, bring me back to truth. When illusion speaks, awaken me. Restore me to wholeness. Yours is the order, yours is the life, the power that sustains me, the glory revealed as a but peace forever and ever. A lion and a rise in me. Let your wisdom move through me. In my speaking, my choices, in my living, as it flows in higher awareness, let it flow through me. Rise in me. Let your wisdom move through me. Yours is the power. Rise in me. Yours is the glory. All through me. Forever embodied, forever I breathe in, I am alive. I breathe out, so it is.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's teaching. Before we begin, take a slow breath. Because for many of us, the moment we hear the words, the 10 Commandments, something tightens inside. We were taught these are rules. These are laws. These are demands. Break them, and God is angry. But what if we've misunderstood them? What if they were never about control? What if they were about protection? Not protection from God, protection from chaos, protection from self-destruction, protection from social collapse, protection from fragmentation of the soul. When you read them slowly, you notice something. They are not mystical rituals. They are not complicated theology. They are structural. They protect trust, marriage, truth, contentment, dignity, rest, and identity. They stabilize society, consciousness, and relationships. And that is why they were given after liberation. Not in Egypt, after Egypt. Because when people leave bondage, but do not rebuild internal structure, freedom collapses into chaos. The commandments were not chains. They were architecture. They were the blueprint for how free people stay free. Today, we will not read them as legal codes. We will read them as psychological safeguards, as cultural stabilizers, as soul-protecting wisdom, And you will see they speak directly to social media culture, to gender wars, to influencer economics, to political manipulation, to comparison anxiety, to humiliation platforms, to scam culture, and to outrage algorithms. These ancient texts understood human consciousness long before we had modern vocabulary for it. So, breathe. This is about clarity, not about fear, but about alignment. Because the commandments were never meant to scare you, they were meant to steady you. And when you see them clearly, you will realize they were never against you. They were always for your wholeness. Let's begin with the first commandment. When we hear the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. Most of us imagine statues, golden calves, ancient altars, primitive tribes. In Exodus 20, the command was given to people just freed from Egypt. They had lived under Pharaoh. Pharaoh was not just a ruler. He was divine authority, absolute control, unquestionable power. After leaving Egypt, the danger was not atheism. The danger was replacing one Pharaoh with another. That is why the first commandment is first. It establishes ultimate authority. What is a god? A god is not just a deity. A god is what governs your decisions, what controls your fear, what shapes your loyalty, what you cannot question. That is your functional God. Let's look at some examples of modern idolatry. 1. Political idolatry. When political identity becomes ultimate, you cannot criticize your side. You demonize the other side. You justify harm for the cause. Politics becomes religion, and discernment disappears. Next, religious leader worship. When pastors become untouchable, questioning is rebellion. Accountability is disloyalty. Abuse is excused as God's will. This violates the first commandment because ultimate authority was never meant to be outsourced to a personality. Next, money as God. When financial security becomes ultimate, You compromise values. You exploit others. You sacrifice integrity. Money is not evil, but when it governs your moral decisions, it becomes a god. Next, gender ideology supremacy. In today's social media climate, high value man, high value woman, red pill extremism, toxic femininity narratives. When dominance becomes identity, when superiority becomes validation, when gender becomes battlefield, ego becomes God, and relationships collapse. Why this commandment matters now? When something becomes ultimate, it demands sacrifice. And people sacrifice peace, relationships, integrity, and truth. Every idol eventually requires something from you. That's the pattern. The psychological layer. Idolatry is insecurity seeking certainty. When people feel unstable, they attach to absolutes. Absolute political loyalty, absolute theological certainty, absolute gender superiority, absolute ideological tribes. The idol provides emotional safety, but it costs freedom. The religious irony. Some people condemn secular idols while idolizing their own theology. If you cannot question your interpretation, if you cannot evolve your understanding, if you fear honest inquiry, your belief system may be functioning as a graven image. The first commandment protects growth. Ask yourself gently, what do I fear questioning? What makes me defensive immediately? What do I defend even when evidence challenges it? That may be your functional God. The healing path. The first commandment is not restrictive. It is protective. When no system becomes ultimate, you regain discernment. You can disagree without hatred. You can evolve without panic. You can belong without surrendering your mind. Ultimate authority belongs to alignment with truth, not tribal loyalty. The first commandment is not about statues. It is about sovereignty. It asks, what governs you? Because whatever governs you shapes you. And when ego governs, division multiplies. But when alignment governs, discernment returns, and discernment is freedom. Second commandment, you shall not make for yourself a graven image. Most people think this about statues. wood, stone, golden calves. But the deeper danger was never sculpture. It was certainty, because an image freezes reality. And what you freeze, you stop growing in. In Exodus 20, Israel had just left Egypt. Egypt was filled with visible gods, statues you could see, touch, control, and appease. The temptation was this: if we can see it, we can manage it. But the commandments resist that impulse, because truth cannot be reduced to an object. What is a graven image today? A graven image is anything you refuse to re-examine, anything you defend without reflection, anything you protect even when it harms. It is not just a statue, it is a frozen idea. Religious graven images. When theology becomes untouchable, when interpretation becomes unquestionable, when this is how we've always done it ends inquiry, we have created an image, even if it is invisible. Some examples: treating one Bible translation as divinely superior, treating cultural traditions as eternal law, equating one denomination with salvation, refusing symbolic readings because literalism feels safer. When growth threatens identity, image protection begins. Cultural graven images. It's not only religion. Modern society has its own idols. Identity labels treated as absolute. Political parties treated as moral perfection. Social media personas curated and defended. High-value frameworks turned into rigid hierarchies. When you cannot evolve beyond a label, you have carved an image of yourself and you begin protecting it. Social media and frozen selves. On social media, identity becomes brand. Brand becomes image. Image becomes survival. People fear growth because growth disrupts brand consistency. So they freeze. They freeze opinions, freeze ideology, freeze personality. But maturity requires fluidity. The second commandment protects evolution. Why images feel safe? Images feel controllable. If God is fixed, I feel secure. If truth is simple, I feel stable. If identity is rigid, I feel grounded. But rigidity is not stability. It is brittleness, and brittle systems crack under pressure. In Gospel of Matthew and throughout the Gospels, Jesus constantly disrupted frozen images. He healed on Sabbath. He redefined purity. He reinterpreted law. Why? Because living truth cannot be reduced to static form. He did not destroy the law, he unfroze it. Psychological insight. When people are insecure, they cling to fixed images. When people are grounded, they can hold ideas loosely. Insecure minds idolize certainty. Secure minds tolerate nuance. The second commandment is psychological wisdom. The hidden danger. Graven images do something subtle. They prevent repentance. Because if your image is perfect, you cannot admit growth. If your theology is flawless, you cannot evolve. If your identity is superior, you cannot learn. Images block humility. The opposite of idolatry is not chaos, it is humility. You can hold convictions without freezing them. You can believe deeply without becoming brittle. You can evolve without losing your center. The commandment is not against creativity. It is against reduction. Truth cannot be reduced to something you can manage. The third commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Weaponizing God in the modern world. When people hear this commandment, they think, don't swear, don't curse, don't say God's name casually. But that is not what this commandment was originally about. It was never primarily about vocabulary. It was about representation. In Exodus 20, the Hebrew word for vain implies empty, false, deceptive, and misrepresenting. To take the name meant to carry it. Israel was called by God's name. They represented divine character in the world. The warning was, do not carry divine identity in a way that empties it of integrity. In biblical language, name means nature. To misuse the name is to misuse the character. This is not about pronunciation. It is about embodiment. If you claim divine alignment, but act in cruelty, you have taken the name in vain. Religious weaponizing today. Modern examples include, God told me to tell you, used to control people. Doom prophecy, used to create fear-based loyalty. Leaders claiming divine authority to avoid accountability. Using scripture to silence victims. This is taking the name in vain. It empties divine character of love and justice. Political and cultural misuse. This extends beyond churches. When political agendas are stamped God's will, when violence is justified as divine mandate, when prejudice is baptized with religious language, that is misrepresentation. This commandment protects society from spiritual abuse. Social media Christianity. We must also look inward. Posting Bible verses while harassing strangers, shaming others, mocking entire groups is a form of vanity, because divine language without divine character becomes hollow. Jesus addressed this directly in Matthew 7. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord. Speech without embodiment. Psychological insight. Why do people weaponize God? Because divine endorsement feels powerful. If God agrees with me, I feel unquestionable. It removes dialogue. It removes humility. It removes accountability. But maturity does not need divine threats to stand firm. The subtle forms. Taking the name in vain also includes using God to threaten children into obedience, using God to pressure partners into submission, using spiritual language to bypass emotional work, claiming moral superiority because of belief. These distort divine character. The cost. When people misuse divine identity, trust erodes, trauma increases, faith collapses, cynicism grows. Many people deconstruct, not because they hate God, but because they were wounded by people misusing the name. The third commandment protects faith from abuse. The healing path. The opposite of vanity is embodiment. Speak less. Live more. If you claim divine alignment, let your character reflect integrity, humility, compassion, and accountability. Divine name is not a slogan. It is a responsibility. The third commandment is not about avoiding certain words. It is about representing truth faithfully. When divine language is used to manipulate, that is vanity. When divine language aligns with compassion, that is integrity. The name is not protected by silence. It is protected by character. The fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Most people were taught this as a strict religious rule, a specific day requirement, a ritual obligation. But if we look at context, this commandment was revolutionary. Israel had just left Egypt. Slaves do not rest. Slaves produce. Slaves perform. Slaves work without pause. Pharaoh did not offer mental health days. So, when God commands rest, it is not about ritual. It is about restoring humanity. Sabbath was anti-slavery architecture. Why remember? Notice the word remember. You don't remember something you've never known. Rest was their natural state before slavery. Slavery erased it. So, Sabbath is memory restoration. Remember who you were before oppression. Hustle culture is modern Egypt. Today, Egypt looks different. It is productivity obsession, rise and grind culture, content creation pressure, always on availability, career as identity. And even in church spaces, endless programs, burnout ministry, spiritual performance, activity mistaken for maturity. We left Egypt physically, but many still carry Egypt in their nervous system. The psychological meaning of Sabbath. Sabbath is not laziness. It is nervous system recalibration. When you never rest, anxiety increases. Impulse control decreases. Emotional regulation weakens. Spiritual clarity fades. Rest stabilizes perception. Rest protects discernment. In Mark 2, Jesus says, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." That statement dismantles legalism. Sabbath is for your restoration, not your surveillance. Jesus heals on Sabbath because healing is rest. Religious distortion. Some turn Sabbath into policing behavior, controlling lifestyle, measuring holiness, which ironically recreates Egypt. When rest becomes anxiety-inducing, it has lost its purpose. Cultural distortion. Modern distortion says, if you rest, you are falling behind. If you pause, you are weak. If you slow down, you lose relevance. This is false urgency. And false urgency destroys long-term stability. Spiritual exhaustion. Many people deconstruct, not because they reject faith, but because they are exhausted. Exhausted by fear-based preaching, endless service demands, pressure to prove spirituality, performance Christianity. Sabbath says you are human before you are productive. Sabbath as identity reset. Sabbath reminds you, you are not your output. You are not your income. You are not your follower count. You are not your ministry role. You are being, not machine. Without Sabbath, freedom collapses into new slavery. Modern application. Modern Sabbath could mean no social media for 24 hours, no debates, no productivity task, no doom content, no relationship strategizing, just being. Not escapism, intentional pause. It is not always about the day, it is about the rhythm. The fourth commandment is not about rule enforcement. It is about restoring humanity. When rest disappears, anxiety increases. When anxiety increases, discernment decreases. When discernment decreases, Egypt returns. Sabbath protects your freedom, and freedom requires rhythm. Sabbath begins in Genesis, not Sinai. Before Sinai, before commandments, before law. Genesis 2 says God rested on the seventh day. God was not tired. Rest here is not recovery. It is completion, stability, integration, harmony. Sabbath is woven into creation itself, which means rest is not reward, it is design. In the book of Exodus, Pharaoh increases labor when Moses asks for freedom. No straw, more bricks, less rest. Slavery removes pause. Modern slavery does the same. Hustle culture, 24/7 connectivity, social comparison, productivity addiction, performance spirituality. If you cannot stop, you are not free. The nervous system and Sabbath. Chronic stress keeps the body in fight, flight, or freeze. When that becomes normal, you think anxiety is personality. Sabbath interrupts adrenaline cycles. It tells the body you are safe. Without safety, clarity cannot function. That is why spiritual maturity collapses under exhaustion. Why remember is critical. The command says, remember the Sabbath. Slaves forget how to rest. High performance forget how to stop. Religious overachievers forget how to breathe. Sabbath is remembering who you are outside productivity. The deep psychological insight. When you refuse rest, it often means you don't feel safe stopping. Some people overwork because silence feels threatening. Some people overserve because stillness exposes emptiness. Some people overpost because invisibility feels like death. Sabbath confronts identity insecurity. It asks, who are you when you are not performing? Sabbath and ego death. Ego feeds on activity, attention, achievement, and applause. Sabbath starves ego. It humbles you because it reminds you the world continues without your control. That is frightening to ego, but stabilizing to soul. In Egypt, rest was disobedience. In capitalism, rest is weakness. In hustle religion, rest is laziness. But Sabbath says, my worth is not tied to output. That is radical. The spiritual layer. If God is portrayed as constantly angry and demanding, you will struggle to rest. If you believe worth must be earned, you will struggle to rest. If you believe love is conditional, you will struggle to rest. Sabbath only works when trust exists. Trust precedes rest. What happens without Sabbath? Without Sabbath, burnout rises, anxiety rises, impulsivity rises, comparison rises, and eventually you recreate Egypt in freedom, which is exactly what happened in Exodus. They left physically, but Egypt lingered internally. Sabbath and deconstruction. For those deconstructing, Sabbath is essential because deconstruction without rest becomes rebellion. Deconstruction with rest becomes integration. You need pause to metabolize truth. Otherwise, you swing from one extreme to another. The 7-day pattern. 7 represents completion. Rest is maturity. If you cannot rest, you have not integrated. Rest is evidence of alignment. The 5th commandment. Honor your father and your mother. For many, this verse brings comfort. For others, it brings confusion. For some, it brings pain. So, we need to slow down because honor has been misunderstood. In ancient Israel, survival depended on family structure. Parents carried tradition, wisdom, identity, and stability. To dishonor them meant destabilizing the entire social fabric. But honor did not mean blind obedience. It meant weight. The Hebrew idea of honor implies giving weight to something, respecting significance. Honor is not enabling abuse. Honor does not mean enduring violence, tolerating manipulation, silencing your trauma, accepting dysfunction. If someone weaponized this verse to control you, that is misusing scripture. Honor and boundaries can coexist. Many people carry inherited fear, inherited shame, inherited scarcity mindset, inherited religious trauma. Honoring parents does not mean repeating their patterns. It means acknowledging their humanity without denying your growth. You can honor origin and still evolve beyond it. Authority and modern distortion. This commandment has also been extended to pastors, leaders, governments, and elders, sometimes in unhealthy ways. Authority without accountability becomes Egypt. Honor without discernment becomes slavery. The fifth commandment was never meant to eliminate critical thinking. In Matthew 15, Jesus confronts religious leaders who use tradition to neglect parents. He protects the commandments. But he also says in Matthew 23, call no man father. Why? Because ultimate identity does not belong to human authority. Jesus honors parents, but he prevents authority worship. The psychological layer. Many people struggle with this commandment because they confuse honor with agreement. You can honor someone's role without agreeing with their behavior. You can acknowledge their sacrifice without absorbing their wounds. Maturity is integration, not imitation. Honor in the age of deconstruction. When people live fear-based systems, sometimes they swing into contempt. They dishonor everything from their past. But healing requires integration. You can say, this harmed me, and still say, I see their humanity. Honor does not mean denial. It means refusing hatred. The promise attached. This commandment uniquely includes a promise that it may go well with you. Why? Because unresolved generational tension destabilizes identity. When you carry resentment, it affects relationships, parenting, authority response, and self-worth. Honor stabilizes continuity. What honor looks like today. Modern honor may look like speaking truth without cruelty, setting boundaries without bitterness, refusing to repeat toxic cycles, acknowledging sacrifices without idolizing them. It is not submission, it is maturity. The deep insight. The first 4 commandments stabilize vertical alignment. This one begins horizontal healing. Without generational reconciliation, society fractures. Without boundaries, families collapse. Honor is not control, it is balance. The 5th commandment is not about forced obedience. It is about stabilizing identity across generations. You can honor without losing yourself. You can set boundaries without dishonoring. You can evolve without hatred, and that is healing. The 6th commandment, you shall not murder. At first glance, this seems simple, don't kill. But Jesus deepens it in Matthew 5. Whoever is angry with his brother. Now, We are no longer just talking about physical violence. We are talking about the root. Murder begins in contempt. Physical murder is the final stage, but it begins earlier. Dehumanization, resentment, contempt, and hatred. When you strip someone of dignity, you prepare the ground for violence. Jesus relocates murder to consciousness. Digital murder. In today's world, most violence is not physical, it is reputational. Cancel culture, online pylons, public shaming, edited clips without context, smear campaigns, destroying someone's livelihood with viral outrage. This is modern murder. Because livelihood and dignity are life structures. Religious murder. Sometimes this happens in church spaces. Public rebukes without due process. Labeling people false prophets casually. Excommunicating without restoration. When religion destroys someone's humanity, it violates this commandment. Gender war and murder language. Online spaces now say all men are, all women are. This dehumanizes entire groups. When you reduce individuals to stereotypes, you remove their complexity. Dehumanization is the psychological soil of violence. Emotional murder. You can murder someone's confidence, voice, dreams, and reputation through constant belittling, through humiliation, through manipulation. Physical harm is not the only violation. Dignity harm counts. Why outrage is addictive? Outrage produces adrenaline. Adrenaline feels powerful. In a powerless society, outrage feels like control. So, people participate in digital violence to feel significant, but it leaves devastation. In Matthew 5, Jesus says, if you are angry, reconcile quickly. He moves from punishment to repair because unchecked anger escalates. The psychological cost. Living in contempt damages the person holding it. Chronic anger raises stress hormones. Stress hormones distort perception. Distorted perception escalates conflict. Murder culture creates anxious societies. What do not murder means today? It means do not dehumanize. Do not weaponize narratives. Do not enjoy someone's downfall. Do not destroy reputations casually. Do not strip people of dignity. You can critique behavior without annihilating identity. The healing path. Instead of outrage, discernment. Instead of public humiliation, private correction when possible. Instead of pylons, pause. Because once dignity is destroyed, restoration is difficult. The sixth commandment is not outdated. It protects life reputation, community, and psychological stability. When dignity collapses, society destabilizes. When we guard dignity, we guard peace. Stripping dignity creates psychological crisis. When someone feels publicly exposed, used financially, manipulated emotionally, blackmailed with secrets, mocked online, discarded after exploitation, it doesn't just hurt their feelings, it can destabilize identity. Shame is one of the most powerful emotional states. And when shame mixes with humiliation and perceived loss of control, the nervous system can enter survival mode. Survival mode narrows thinking, and narrow thinking reduces consequences analysis. This is where escalation becomes possible. Nothing to lose is a dangerous mental state. When a person feels, I've already lost my dignity, my reputation is ruined, I've been humiliated, I've been used, the brain can shift from preservation to retaliation. That does not justify violence, but it explains how some tragedies unfold. When people feel stripped of worth, desperation increases. Exploitation culture and escalation. Online spaces sometimes normalize using someone for money, teaching manipulation strategies, recording private interactions, exposing secrets as leverage, treating relationships as transactions. This is not empowerment, it is destabilization. When relationships become extraction systems, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, volatility increases. Why the commandment is protective? You shall not murder begins before physical harm. It begins with protecting dignity. When you respect boundaries, avoid humiliation, refuse blackmail, avoid public shaming, treat people as human, not disposable, you reduce escalation risk. Dignity preservation stabilizes society. Exploitation culture as a risk factor. Online culture sometimes teaches use men for money, extract resources strategically, record conversations for leverage, publicly expose if you don't get what you want, discard partners once you are done. Likewise, some toxic male spaces teach dehumanize women, humiliate publicly, replace without empathy, never show vulnerability. Both sides strip dignity. When people feel treated as disposable, resentment accumulates. Resentment plus humiliation equals volatility. The deep insight. If you build a culture where people are disposable, secrets are leverage, money is extraction, and reputation is currency, you are increasing volatility. The sixth commandment protects life by protecting dignity first. Because once dignity is gone, stability weakens. The healing path. Instead of humiliation culture, teach discernment, not manipulation. Teach boundaries, not exploitation. Teach self-worth, not transactional value. Teach transparency, not leverage games. That reduces escalation. That stabilizes relationships. That protects life. Violence doesn't appear from nowhere. It grows in soil of humiliation, shame, and dehumanization. And when dignity is guarded, society becomes safer. Jesus and dignity restoration. When Jesus encounters people publicly shamed, the woman accused, the tax collector, the leper, he restores dignity first. Before correction, before instruction, dignity stabilizes. Stability allows transformation. Humiliation destabilizes. Destabilization escalates. Humiliation culture is not empowerment. Any platform, male or female, that teaches use people sexually, discard people emotionally, dehumanize the opposite sex, treat intimacy as conquest, tie worth to body count is not empowerment. It is fragmentation. It produces emptiness, addiction cycles, distrust, relational instability, and eventually loneliness. The double standard reveals the distortion. When someone says, sleep with numerous women, build experience, maximize your options, then marry a virgin, pause. That is not leadership. That is contradiction. It is saying, I will pollute the well, but expect clean water for myself. That logic collapses under scrutiny. If every man followed that advice, there would be no virgin left. So, the system feeds on itself. It is unsustainable. Here's the deeper layer. No one accidentally lands in humiliation spaces. They resonate with something already unresolved. Rejection, insecurity, wounded pride, comparison, and shame. If bitterness is already present, a teacher who validates that bitterness feels powerful. But validation is not healing. It is reinforcement. We are responsible for guarding our garden. This is Genesis 2 language. Not every voice nourishes. Some voices poison. Some teachings excite ego, but damage integrity. Some ideas stimulate desire, but destabilize identity. Guarding your garden means filtering, testing, reflecting, and slowing down. Not every loud voice is wisdom. Venomous teachings and nervous system damage. Repeated exposure to humiliation-based ideology increases aggression, reduces empathy, normalizes exploitation, encourages detachment. Over time, this creates emptiness because using people never produces fulfillment. It produces fragmentation. The hidden hypocrisy. Often, the loudest teachers don't even live what they preach. They sell ideology. They monetize outrage. They build audiences on polarization. But when their private lives are exposed, instability appears. Why? Because humiliation-based systems collapse internally. This is not just about men. There are also platforms teaching women extract money, manipulate emotions, use leverage, play strategic games, different packaging, same poison. When relationships become transactional, trust collapses. When trust collapses, society destabilizes. The real root. At the root of humiliation culture is fear of vulnerability. It is easier to dominate than to love, easier to objectify than to connect, easier to compete than to be known. But connection requires integrity, and integrity requires self-awareness. Humiliation culture feels powerful in the moment, but it produces isolation, distrust, emptiness, and emotional instability. Guard your garden. Not every loud voice is truth. Not every viral platform is wisdom. Not every confident teacher is healed. Choose voices that nourish your character, because what you consume eventually becomes how you live. This is Genesis 3 language. When scripture speaks of wrath, it often describes what happens when alignment collapses, not divine temper, structural consequence. If you normalize exploitation, distrust, game playing, emotional manipulation, and conquest over covenant, you don't need heaven to punish you. The system destabilizes itself. That destabilization feels like wrath. What we are seeing now, men saying, "No one will use me again." Women saying, "No one will use me again." Translation: defensive walls. And when both sides are defensive, connection becomes nearly impossible. So, what happens? Delayed commitment, suspicion in dating, testing and games, emotional detachment, chronic loneliness. That is not punishment, that is consequence. The loneliness epidemic. When vulnerability is mocked and intimacy is weaponized, people protect themselves. Protection becomes isolation. Isolation becomes depression. Depression becomes despair. That is the wrath, not fire. Fragmentation. Some men quote Paul out of context. But Paul was not a misogynist. In Galatians 3:28, he says, There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ. That alone dismantles domination theology. In Romans 16, he names women leaders. He honors them publicly. He commends them as co-laborers. In Acts 18, Priscilla and her husband Aquila teach Apollos, a learned man, and Priscilla is often named first. Paul never erased women. He operated within cultural constraints while planting seeds of equality. Headship was never tyranny. When Paul speaks of head, he ties it to Christ. Christ's leadership was sacrificial, non-coercive, self-giving, and protective. If someone uses headship to dominate, they are not reflecting Christ. They are reflecting ego. What we are witnessing today is not just dating confusion. It is not just masculinity versus femininity. It is not just social media noise. It is the visible collapse of an ego-based system. And the Bible warned us about this system. Not in modern language, but in symbolic language. It called it Babylon. What is Babylon? In Revelation 17 to 18, Babylon is described as luxurious, seductive, influential, commercial, intoxicating, and proud. Babylon represents a culture where everything becomes transactional, even bodies, even relationships, even identity. Babylon monetizes dignity. The merchant mindset. Revelation says the merchant mourned her fall. Why? Because they were profiting from her system. Now look at today. Rate yourself. Increase your market value. Trade up. Upgrade partners. Leverage beauty. Leverage income. Human beings are now assets. This is merchant language. When people become products, relationships become contracts, and contracts lack covenant depth. The gender war, as Babylon manifested. Men thought, maximize options, never commit emotionally, build status, dominate. Women thought, extract resources, secure the bag, upgrade strategically, never be vulnerable. Different packaging, same poison. Both are defensive, both are transactional, both are insecure. That insecurity produces loneliness, anxiety, depression, and distrust. This is the wrath, not fire from heaven, structural collapse. Wrath as system failure. When Revelation speaks of bowls poured out, it is symbolic of systems breaking under distortion. If you build intimacy on ego, ego eventually implodes it. If you build dating culture on suspicion, trust evaporates. If you build masculinity on domination, connection dies. If you build femininity on leverage, security collapses. That collapse feels catastrophic, but it is consequence. Why ego never wins? Ego thrives on comparison, hierarchy, ranking, and superiority. But ego cannot sustain peace. Ego creates temporary attraction. Character creates lasting stability. You can have wealth without integrity, but you cannot have trust without integrity. Trust is relational currency. Without trust, no relationship survives long term. Revelation says, come out of her. Not physically, psychologically. Come out of commodity thinking, dominance thinking, status obsession, ranking language, high value comparisons. Leave ego economy and enter character economy. The New Jerusalem contrast. After Babylon falls, Revelation shows a new city, transparent, light-filled, restorative, healing for the nations. This is relational harmony imagery. No competition, no exploitation, no humiliation, just integration. That is what healed masculinity and healed femininity look like. Redefining value. High value is not income, followers, body count, desirability metrics, and luxury lifestyle. High value is integrity, consistency, emotional maturity, faithfulness, humility, and self-control. Money impresses briefly, but character sustains permanently. The hope in collapse. The emptiness people feel today is not punishment. It is awakening. When conquest leaves you empty, you realize conquest is not fulfillment. When status leaves you anxious, you realize status is not stability. Collapse is invitation to awaken. We are not opponents. We are image bearers. The gender war is ego reacting to insecurity. Babylon is ego institutionalized. And ego always collapses under its own weight. Come out of Babylon. Guard your garden. Build with integrity, because only character sustains love. The seventh commandment: you shall not commit adultery. Most people reduce this to don't cheat, but the commandment goes deeper. It is about divided loyalty, and divided loyalty destabilizes everything. Adultery is more than physical. It begins before the body. It begins in attention, in secrecy, in comparison, in emotional withdrawal. Jesus deepens it in Matthew 5. He says, if you lust with intent, you've already crossed into distortion. Why? Because covenant requires presence and lust fractures presence. Covenant versus consumption. Adultery culture teaches upgrade when bored, replace when dissatisfied, keep options open, never fully commit. That is consumption thinking. Covenant thinking says invest, build, repair, stay. Consumption erodes trust. Covenant builds security. The gender war connection. In red pill and hyper-independent spaces, we hear keep multiple options, never fully trust, always be ready to replace. That mindset kills intimacy because intimacy requires exclusivity of loyalty, not ownership, but devotion. Adultery as fragmentation. When loyalty is divided, energy fragments, trust weakens, security declines. Fragmented people struggle to bond deeply. Bonding requires consistency. Consistency requires integrity. The psychological cost. Adultery culture produces anxiety, comparison, jealousy, fear of abandonment, and distrust cycles. When loyalty feels unstable, the nervous system cannot relax. Safety disappears, and without safety, love cannot flourish. Scripture uses marriage symbolically. Throughout the Bible, covenant is marriage language. God and Israel, Christ and the church. Why? Because covenant represents exclusive devotion, faithful alignment, relational stability. Adultery symbolizes divided allegiance, spiritual distraction, identity instability. Today, adultery may look like emotional affairs through DMs, pornography addiction, secret parallel conversations, entertaining backup options, constant comparison culture. It erodes trust silently. The Babylon connection. Babylon is described as committing fornication with nations in Book of Revelation. That is symbolic of systemic unfaithfulness. When loyalty is to ego instead of integrity, collapse follows. Adultery destabilizes covenant, and covenant is society's backbone. Why it matters now? We live in a culture of options, infinite scroll, infinite profiles, infinite comparison. But infinite options destroy contentment. Contentment stabilizes love. The healing path. Adultery prevention is not about fear. It is about discipline of attention. Guard your eyes. Guard your conversations. Guard emotional intimacy. Guard secrecy. Wholeness requires focus. Focus protects covenant. The seventh commandment protects trust, security, stability, and generational continuity. Adultery is not just betrayal of a spouse, it is betrayal of alignment. And when alignment fractures, society trembles. Covenant builds, consumption collapses. Choose loyalty, choose depth, choose wholeness. The eighth commandment, you shall not steal, found in Exodus 20, verse 15. Most assume this to mean, don't take what isn't yours. And yes, that is part of it. But theft is deeper than property. It includes dignity, time, trust, energy, and peace. Today, theft looks like identity theft, phishing scams, investment fraud, romance scams, fake business fronts, account hacking, and loan manipulation. It is digital, it is invisible, but it is destructive. Identity theft is dignity theft. When someone uses another person's information to drain accounts, open credit lines, destroy financial records, they are not just stealing money. They are stealing years of discipline, years of savings, years of stability, years of trust building. Financial stability is psychological stability. When it collapses suddenly, it destabilizes the nervous system. That is not small. The lack of empathy. What makes scamming culture dangerous is not just greed. It is empathy erosion. When someone can say, they have money, they will survive, they are foolish anyway, that is dehumanization. And dehumanization is the soil of exploitation. If it were done to them, they would feel violated. So, the real fracture is conscience. Easy money culture. Some environments normalize get rich quick. Secure it however you can. If they are naive, that's on them. But easy money gained without integrity carries psychological costs. Even if the legal system never catches you, your nervous system knows. Chronic dishonesty produces anxiety, hypervigilance, distrust of others, fear of exposure. Peace and fraud cannot coexist long term. Scamming as modern Babylon. Babylon monetized everything. Today, fake investment platforms, Ponzi schemes, crypto manipulation, influencer scams. People promise unrealistic returns, take money and disappear. That is Babylon energy. Extraction without accountability. But unsustainable systems eventually collapse. The ripple effect. When scams increase, people become suspicious. Trust decreases. Legitimate businesses struggle. Communities fracture. One act of theft spreads distrust widely. The eighth commandment protects society at scale. We must guard our garden. This applies here too. Not every investment is wise. Not every opportunity is legitimate. Not every mentor is ethical. Discernment protects. But the burden of discernment does not justify exploitation. Victims are not at fault for trusting. Exploitation is still violation. The conscience question. Before scamming someone, a person must silence something internally. That silencing becomes habit. And when conscience is repeatedly silenced, character erodes. And when character erodes, peace erodes. That is internal collapse. Paul says in Ephesians 4:28, let the thief no longer steal, but work, that he may have something to give. Notice the end goal. Not just stop stealing, start contributing. Contribution rebuilds dignity. Extraction destroys it. The mirror test. A simple test. If this were done to me, would I feel violated? If yes, do not do it to another. That is conscience. That is integrity. Identity theft, scamming, and fraud are not just financial crimes. They are fractures of conscience. The eighth commandment protects trust, security, stability, and peace. When we choose contribution over exploitation, we stabilize not only others, but ourselves. Because peace only grows where integrity lives. In many societies, the poor are mocked, disrespected, ignored, and silenced, while the wealthy are praised, honored, centered, and respected. That creates a dangerous hierarchy of dignity. When dignity becomes tied to money, worth becomes transactional. And when worth becomes transactional, people feel desperate to climb. Desperation distorts judgment. When someone feels invisible, powerless, discarded, and locked out of opportunity, the temptation grows. If the system doesn't care about me, why should I care about the system? That's the psychological pivot point. But here's the tension. Pain explains behavior. It does not justify it. Scripture was never against the poor. In Book of Proverbs, contempt for the poor is condemned. In James 2, James rebukes favoritism toward the wealthy. Jesus consistently elevated the marginalized. The problem is not poverty. The problem is contempt. When wealth becomes the only measure, if society communicates you matter only if you have money, then people will chase money at any cost. If integrity does not earn respect, but wealth does, the incentive system becomes corrupt. Corrupt incentives produce corrupt behavior. The crossroads. At the point of desperation, a person has two paths. Path 1, I will violate others because the system violated me. Path 2, I will build differently, even if slower. The first path feels faster. The second path builds stability. The tragedy is that exploitation often seems like survival, but exploitation eventually multiplies instability. The systemic layer. When education is unequal, opportunity is scarce, corruption is normalized, wealth is flaunted, it increases resentment. Resentment fuels entitlement thinking. They owe me. I deserve it. I will take it. But taking without covenant fractures trust further. And fractured trust hurts everyone, including the poor. The deeper truth: respect should never be tied solely to money. When dignity is restored independent of wealth, the temptation to violate decreases. Because what people crave most is not money, it is respect. Breaking the cycle. If you are poor and treated with contempt, you have experienced injustice. But if you respond with fraud or theft, you multiply injustice. The system is healed when integrity rises despite pressure. That is strength, not weakness. Jesus and the dignity shift. Jesus did not tell the poor, take from the rich. He restored dignity first. He affirmed worth without transaction. When dignity is affirmed, desperation reduces. The hard but healing reality. Systemic injustice explains temptation, but character determines response. You may not control the system you were born into, but you control the system you build within yourself. Integrity under pressure is power. Yes, contempt for the poor breeds resentment. Resentment tempts exploitation, but exploitation deepens instability. The cycle breaks when dignity is restored without becoming destructive. Money should never determine worth. And when we stop equating wealth with value, we reduce desperation culture. The eighth commandment protects everyone, rich and poor alike, because trust is the real currency of peace. Ninth commandment: you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Most people think this simply means don't lie in court. But false witness is much broader. It is narrative distortion. And in today's world, Narratives shape reality. False witness is more than lying. It includes twisting facts, removing context, editing clips deceptively, creating rumors, exaggerating for attention, framing someone maliciously. False witness is when you distort truth in a way that harms another's reputation. Reputation is social currency. Destroy it unjustly, and you destabilize someone's life. Social media and public trial culture. Today we see viral accusations, cancel campaigns, screenshots without context, private conversations made public. People are judged before investigation. Mob mentality escalates quickly. False witness spreads faster than correction. And even if proven wrong later, the damage remains. Narrative as power. Controlling narrative means controlling perception, and perception controls reputation. When someone manipulates narrative for money, revenge, attention, and clout, they are committing false witness. It is not always courtroom drama. It is digital distortion. Gender war and false witness. We see it in generalizations. All men are, all women are. That is false witness at scale. It reduces individuals to stereotypes. It fools division. It creates hostility, and hostility escalates. Political and religious false witness. It also appears in preachers misquoting others, politicians manipulating statistics, influencers spreading half-truths, prophets declaring things God never said. When truth becomes a tool, integrity collapses. Jesus and false witness. At Jesus' trial in Mark 14, false witnesses were brought against him. They could not agree. Yet, narrative pressure condemned him anyway. False witness can destroy even the innocent. The psychological damage. When someone is falsely accused, it destabilizes identity. It creates anxiety. It affects livelihood. It damages trust networks. False witness is reputation violence. Why this commandment protects society? Truth stabilizes systems. If truth collapses, trust collapses, justice collapses, community collapses. When false narratives become normal, society becomes paranoid. Guarding your fang and feed. To honor this commandment today, verify before sharing. Avoid outrage reposting. Refuse to amplify unverified claims. Be slow to judge publicly. James warned about the tongue. Paul warned about corrupt speech. Jesus warned about contempt. It's all connected. The deep insight. False witness often begins with insecurity. When someone feels small, they enlarge themselves by diminishing others. That is ego architecture. But integrity refuses to distort truth for gain. The ninth commandment protects justice, trust, dignity, and community stability. Truth is not optional. Truth is infrastructure. When truth collapses, chaos rises. Choose careful speech. Choose verification. Choose integrity over virality. Because narratives build worlds and distorted narratives destroy them. We live in an age where an allegation can trend in minutes. A clip can circulate globally in hours. A reputation can collapse in a day. In ancient courts, false witness required 2 or 3 witnesses. Today, one viral post can function as a digital courtroom. The ninth commandment has never been more relevant. The damage of premature judgment. When accusations surface, especially serious ones like abuse or corruption, the stakes are high. And here's the tension. We must take accusations seriously, but we must not weaponize accusations casually. If someone is guilty, justice matters. But if someone is innocent, public humiliation can destroy contracts, ruin careers, damage families, trigger mental health collapse, lead to social exile. Even if cleared later, reputational damage often remains. That is the power of narrative. Clip culture has made distortion easy. Take 10 seconds out of a 2-hour interview, remove context, add inflammatory caption, push it viral. Now millions judge without full information. The full video may reveal nuance, but outrage spreads faster than correction. This is modern false witness. Political weaponization. We see it in politics constantly. Opposing parties edit speeches, frame statements strategically, highlight worst moments, suppress clarifications. It creates online hostility. People begin hating individuals they have never actually heard in full context. Division escalates. False witness at scale destabilizes nations. The psychological mechanism. Why does false witness spread so quickly? Because outrage triggers dopamine. Outrage makes people feel morally superior. Sharing indignation feels powerful. But power without verification is dangerous. The brain prefers dramatic narratives over nuanced truth. Real harm versus manufactured harm. This is critical. Acknowledging false accusations does not mean dismissing real victims. Both realities exist. The ninth commandment protects the falsely accused, the integrity of justice, the seriousness of true claims. When accusations are weaponized, it harms real victims too, because it creates skepticism culture. Guarding against reaction. Before sharing, ask, have I verified the full context? Have I watched the entire video? Am I reacting emotionally? Am I amplifying harm prematurely? Wisdom slows down. Integrity pauses. The cost of narrative violence. Reputation destruction is a form of social death. Even if innocence is proven years later, time cannot be restored. False imprisonment, lost contracts, broken relationships, mental health scars. That is why the ninth commandment is structural. Truth stabilizes justice. Distortion destabilizes society. The deeper cultural issue. We have built a culture that rewards scandal, exposure, conflict, and clicks. Outrage monetizes. Truth rarely trends. But integrity refuses to trade accuracy for attention. The ninth commandment is not about being polite. It is about protecting justice. In an age of virality, truth requires patience. Judgment requires evidence. Integrity requires restraint. Do not let outrage replace discernment. Because once a reputation is destroyed, even innocence struggles to rebuild it. And when truth collapses, trust collapses with it. In James 3, James says, the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts great things. See how great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. Now think about modern reality. A tweet, a post, a clip, a caption, small spark, massive wildfire. James wasn't speaking metaphorically for poetry's sake. He was describing escalation dynamics. James says the tongue sets on fire the course of nature. In other words, speech alters trajectories. A false accusation can alter a career, a family, a community, an election, a nation. Commandment 9 says, do not bear false witness. James says, your speech can burn forests. Same warning, different language. James 3 continues, where envy and self-seeking exist, there is confusion and every evil thing. Let's pause. Why do false narratives spread? Sometimes it's revenge. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's politics. Sometimes it's insecurity. Sometimes it's envy. When someone rises in success, jealousy can trigger narrative attack. James calls that earthly, unspiritual wisdom. It feels strategic, but it produces chaos. James 1:19 says, "Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger." In the age of instant posting, this verse is revolutionary. Slow speech reduces false witness. Slow speech protects dignity. Slow speech stabilizes justice. Do not slander. James 4 warns against speaking evil against one another. Slander is not only lying, it includes exaggeration, selective framing, malicious tone. It is possible to technically tell the truth while presenting it to destroy someone. That still violates the spirit of Commandment 9. The social media amplifier. In James' time, false speech spread locally. Today, it spreads globally in seconds. The tongue has become digital. Your keyboard is your tongue, and viral outrage is modern wildfire. James' warning is now amplified. The psychological root. James asks, "Where do wars come from among you?" And he answers, desire, envy, unregulated impulse. False witness is rarely neutral. It is often emotional discharge. When someone feels powerless, narrative control becomes weapon. The mirror principle. James also says the word is a mirror. Before speaking about others, examine yourself. Am I reacting from hurt? Am I projecting? Am I seeking attention? Am I feeding outrage? The mirror interrupts distraction. Wisdom from above. James contrasts two types of wisdom: earthly wisdom, envious, self-seeking, chaotic. Wisdom from above, pure, peaceable, gentle, full of mercy, impartial. False witness thrives in earthly wisdom. Integrity thrives in peaceable wisdom. The integrated pattern. Exodus says, "Do not bear false witness." Jesus says, "Contempt is dangerous." Paul says, "Let no corrupt speech proceed." James says, "Your tongue can ignite destruction." This is one coherent warning. Guard your speech, because speech builds or burns worlds. In the age of virality, Commandment 9 is urgent. Truth requires patience. Integrity requires restraint. And James reminds us, before you light the match, consider the forest. Guard your tongue. Guard your timeline. Guard your reaction. Because once a reputation burns, ashes are hard to rebuild. The 10th commandment. The 10th commandment says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor anything that belongs to your neighbor. Notice something unique. Unlike the others, this one addresses the heart directly, not action, desire. Coveting is comparison that turns into craving. It begins subtly. Why does she have that? Why is he earning that? Why is their marriage like that? Why is their life easier? Comparison alone is not sin, but comparison plus resentment equals coveting. Coveting says, I deserve what they have. And when desire turns to entitlement, distortion begins. Social media as coveting machine. Modern platforms amplify this commandment. Constant exposure to luxury lifestyles, curated relationships, filtered beauty, financial highlights, selective success. You are not seeing reality. You are seeing presentation. But the brain compares anyway. Comparison produces anxiety. Anxiety produces dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction tempts shortcuts. The chain reaction. Coveting fools, adultery. I want what isn't mine. Theft. I will take what I don't have. False witness. I will diminish them. Murder. I resent them. Idolatry. I worship status. The 10th commandment explains the others. It is root architecture. Gender war and coveting. Men coveting status. Women coveting lifestyle. Both coveting validation. When someone sees a wealthy influencer, a glamorous relationship, a viral personality, they may feel behind, inferior, and restless. That restlessness fuels desperation, and desperation fuels poor decisions. The anxiety economy. Modern culture monetizes comparison. The more dissatisfied you feel, the more you consume. Buy this, upgrade that, enhance yourself, level up constantly. Peace is bad for marketing. Contentment doesn't sell. So, anxiety is amplified. Coveting becomes economic fuel. In Philippians 4, Paul says, I have learned to be content. Contentment is learned. It is not automatic. It requires identity stability. Contentment protects peace. In Matthew 6, Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Coveting misplaces treasure. It shifts focus outward constantly. But stability comes from internal alignment. Coveting and depression. Constant comparison reduces gratitude. increases insecurity, distorts perception of self. It creates chronic dissatisfaction, and chronic dissatisfaction is exhausting. Peace requires gratitude. The counter practice. Instead of coveting, practice gratitude. Celebrate others genuinely. Focus on stewardship. Limit comparison exposure. Guard your garden. Not every highlight deserves your attention. The deeper insight. Coveting says, I am incomplete unless I have what they have. But image-bearing identity says, I already possess intrinsic worth. When identity stabilizes, comparison loses power. The 10th commandment is quiet, but it protects your peace. Comparison can distort your perception. Resentment can poison your joy, but contentment restores balance. In a culture built on envy, gratitude is rebellion. Choose contentment because peace grows where comparison dies. Family, let's breathe here. Because some of the people who taught toxicity were wounded. Some who humiliated others were hurting. Some who chased luxury came from lack. Some who manipulated were once ignored. Some who scammed felt invisible in a system that mocked poverty. Some who played games never experienced secure love. Some who chased status were starving for affirmation. Some who degraded women never saw healthy masculinity modeled. Some who weaponized independence never felt safe to depend. We must say this clearly. Pain explains behavior. It does not excuse harm, but it explains misalignment. No child says, one day I will manipulate people. One day I will exploit others. One day I will degrade dignity. Distortion grows slowly from neglect, rejection, comparison, insecurity, unresolved anger, and low self-worth. When the soul is hungry, it will eat whatever is available, even poison. Genesis 2 says, of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. That was not a threat, it was caution. When you eat from comparison, you start ranking. When you eat from resentment, you start justifying harm. When you eat from ego, you begin competing. You ate from that tree. Out of insecurity, out of hunger, out of pain. But eating from it does not mean you are condemned. It means you misaligned. Genesis also says, guard the garden, cultivate it. Be careful what you allow in. Some voices fed your bitterness. Some platforms fed your contempt. Some lifestyles fed your ego. Some ideologies fed your insecurity. You consumed poison. Now you know, and knowing is awakening. Revelation says, come out of her, not be destroyed, not you are rejected. It is invitation. Come out of ego economy. Come out of humiliation culture. Come out of transactional love. Come out of greed. Come out of bitterness. The Father is not angry. He is calling you back to alignment. Adam, where are you? Where is your awareness? Return to your awareness. Misalignment is not final. You scammed. You manipulated. You degraded. You chased empty validation. You taught toxic ideas. You fell for luxury illusions. You hurt people. But misalignment is not identity. It is distortion. And distortion can be corrected. Realignment means taking responsibility without self-hatred, learning without shame paralysis, repairing where possible, stopping the pattern. You are not beyond restoration. You were wounded. You misaligned. Now you awaken. The Father is not angry. If wrath were final, there would be no invitation. But the consistent voice through scripture says, return, realign, restore. Jesus did not shame the broken. He restored dignity first. That is the pattern. The garden can be replanted. You cannot change yesterday, but you can choose what you plant today. Plant integrity. Plant discipline. Plant honesty. Plant humility. Plant gratitude. The soil responds to new seeds. There is one more thing. Awakening is not only revelation, it is restoration. If you have lied and someone suffered because of it, alignment invites correction. If you blackmailed someone and damaged their reputation, maturity invites repair. If you scam someone out of their savings, realignment invites restitution. If you set someone up and they pay the price, healing invites honesty. Not because God is angry, not because you are cursed, but because integrity completes itself through restoration. Zacchaeus was not forced. He encountered clarity, and clarity made him restore. That is what awakening does. It doesn't just change how you think. It changes what you fix. Realignment is not just internal, it becomes external. Where you can repair, repair. Where you can repay, repay. Where you can correct, correct. Where you cannot undo the past, stop the pattern. Healing is not proven by emotion. It is proven by integrity. And integrity sometimes looks like humility, not public humiliation, but quiet responsibility. If something in you knows you need to make something right, that is not condemnation. That is invitation. You are being called upward because when you restore what was broken, you free yourself too. A closing prayer. Father, source of life, origin of truth, we come without hiding, not in fear, not in shame, but in honesty. Say with me, if I have misaligned, let me see clearly without crushing myself. If I have hurt others out of insecurity, heal the root in me. If I chase validation because I felt unseen, remind me I was never invisible to you. If I manipulated because I felt powerless, restore my dignity so I no longer harm others. If I spoke falsely because I was angry, steady my tongue. If I took what was not mine, give me courage to restore. If I destroyed someone's name, teach me how to rebuild dignity. If I participated in humiliation culture, teach me humility. If I justified harm because I was wounded, heal the wound so I no longer wound others. If I consumed poisonous teachings, cleanse my mind with clarity. If I planted seeds of distortion, help me replant integrity. I release self-hatred. I release defensiveness. I release excuses. I release the need to protect my ego. I accept responsibility without collapsing in shame. I embrace correction without losing my dignity. I choose integrity over image. I choose repair over reputation. I choose maturity over pride. I choose truth over virality. I choose contentment over comparison. Where I can repair, I will repair. Where I can repay, I will repay. Where I must apologize, I will humble myself. Where I cannot undo the past, help me end the pattern. Guard my garden. Cleanse my thoughts. Strengthen my character. Let my words restore dignity. Let my actions reflect alignment. You are not against me. You are inviting me upward. I am not condemned. I am called to realign. I was misaligned. Now I realign. I breathe in mercy. I breathe out shame. I breathe in clarity. I breathe out confusion. I breathe in dignity. I breathe out ego. And I walk forward differently, whole, aware, restored, not out of fear, but out of awakening. Amen. Family, that's all I have for you today. Good night, and thanks for watching.
I've been carried by a whisper through the chaos of my mind. You remind me who I am when the world pulls me outside. In the stillness you awaken what my heart was made to see. Every breath becomes a promise that you're living here in me. It is well with my being when my soul aligns with you. Every storm becomes a silence. Every fear is passing through. You restore my inner gardens before fear tried to define me. He spoke me whole, he spoke me clear, called me very good right here. Not a copy, not a clone, breathing flesh but not alone. Life sealed deep within my frame, I carry more than just a name. I don't chase what I already bear, I don't reach for what's already here. The mirror was never cracked, I just forgot how to look back. I reflect the Father, I reflect His glory, I reflect perfection written in His story. I bear His nature, I carry His flame, sealed with His life. I'm not ashamed. Christ in me, the living sign, His essence breathing through my life. Not striving up, we're not falling short, not bought with fear, not bound by cord. His image wasn't lost in time, it's waking up inside my mind. What He is, He shared with me, not divided, not withheld. The same life that spoke the stars is the life I carry as myself. If He is light, then so am I. If He is love, I won't deny. Reflection doesn't steal the flame, it proves the fire's still the same. I reflect the Father, I reflect His glory, I reflect perfection written in His story. I bear His nature, I carry His flame, sealed with His life. I'm not ashamed. Christ in me, the truth made plain. His breath, His life, His name. He didn't make me broken, He didn't make me small, He didn't change His mind about me at the fall. The breath He gave, He never withdrew. The image He formed is still true. I reflect the Father, not by effort but by birth. His glory moving through me, sanctifying earth. I bear His image, I walk in grace. Christ alive in me,